Commence primary ignition.
Welcome to Unlimited Power. My name is D-Rod, and here's my guide to updating your Spark of Rebellion starter deck with Star Wars Unlimited's newest set, Shadows of the Galaxy. Now, one of the reasons why I'm making a video like this is because I remember what it's like to get into a game, find starter decks at all my local game stores, but being unable to find any of the previous sets that work well with those starter decks. So today we're going to be focusing on how can you improve your Spark of Rebellion starter decks when you only have access to Shadows of the Galaxy cards. Just like last time, we're going to be focusing on decks that are a budget series and a master series. Our budget decks are going to be only using commons and uncommons that you can find within Shadows of the Galaxy, and our master ones are going to be focusing on the rares and legendaries that can really fill out the same themes we found within those starter decks. Let's go ahead and take a look at one right now. Let's look at upgrading the Darth Vader starter deck. Now, as a leader, Vader has the ability to where you can spend one resource and take an action to exhaust him. And if you do, if you played a black villainy aspect card this phase, you can deal 1 damage to a unit and 1 damage to a base. This is helpful of taking care of a lot of those low health units in play by damaging them or slowly pinging some larger units. You can also use this to destroy some of your own units in play that are going to get you some benefits that your opponent wouldn't get, as well as slowly damaging their base over time. Now, as an epic action, you can deploy Vader if you control 7 or more resources, which usually means as early as turn 6. When he's deployed, he has a 5 attack and 8 health, and on attack he can deal 2 damage to a unit. With Vader already, we're seeing a really key ability in the aggression villain aspect, and that is dealing direct damage to units and bases. So what is the starter deck set up to do? Your starter deck from Spark of Rebellion is set up to accelerate your resources, allow a unit to attack multiple times in a turn, and to deal direct damage to units. How does it do that? It does that by using a couple of staples that are built into the deck, and these staples you're going to see 3 of in your starter deck that are super beneficial to these budget and master decks we're going to show you. The first card is going to be Admiral Mahdi, a 2-cost unit that has the villain aspect symbol. They have 1 attack and 1 power, 1 power and 1 health, and when defeated, you may ready a black aspect unit. So you can use Vader's own ability to damage Mahdi to defeat him, and then untap a black aspect unit you have. If Vader's in play, you can always ready Vader after he does his on-attack ability, because Vader is exhausted when he begins his attack, so that means they can ready themselves and attack again that same turn. The next card is going to be Super Laser Technician, a 3-cost villainy command aspect card with a 2 power and 1 health. When defeated, you may put it into play as a resource and ready the resource. Super Laser Technician is great because you can use it to your advantage in multiple ways, whether you're attacking a unit to deal 2 damage, attacking a base for 2 damage, and then defeating it yourself or allowing your opponent to defeat it so that way you can get a resource from it. You can either use Vader's abilities to defeat it, or you can, again, swing into an opponent's unit. Next is Vader's lightsaber. Vader being the key word here for this deck. The lightsaber makes sense because it's a 2-cost upgrade that has the villainy aspect symbol, so you can trigger Vader's ability. It gives any of your units +3/+1, so you can throw it on anything besides Vader early on to get some more damage. But if you play it on Vader himself, you're going to be able to deal 4 direct damage to a ground unit. And lastly, this card is actually a 1-of in your deck, but it is so good and I recommend keeping it in there. It's a 5-cost command event that also has the villainy symbol. You give a friendly unit +2/+2 for the phase. Then it deals damage equal to its power divided as you choose among any number of other units. This card is great because it allows you to either get ahead of your opponent if you're in a stalemate, or for you to catch up to your opponent if you're behind. By damaging their units, you're probably going to be able to defeat them. You're also going to give a buff to your unit that's a +2/+2 for the whole phase, meaning if you decide to attack into their base or attack into their unit, or throw it on a sentinel unit, you're going to get some more rewards here. This is also one of my favorite pieces of art in the card game so far. So let's look at the budget deck. Again, the budget deck is going to be focusing on commons and uncommons found within the Shadows of the Galaxy set. We're going to avoid any of them in the starter for the budget deck. This is for people who are mostly only able to acquire booster packs very limitedly, or are pulling from other people's collections and just need some assistance there. We're also going to be continuing to focus on the Imperial theme that we see in the starter deck. So a lot of the cards we want to focus on are going to be Imperials. That way there's a little bit more synergy with cards like General Veers. Now, as a goal of this deck, we want to deploy Vader on turn 5, so we're still going to aim for getting him out one turn early. We want to use Mahdi so we can attack twice in a turn with any of our characters, but Darth Vader would be the best one. And we want to play low-cost units and attack our opponent's base. So right there, we really want to focus on an aggressive strategy. We only need to swing in opponent's units if we feel like it's going to be threatening to us in the long run, or if maybe it has a crazy on attack ability that we want to take care of that may be causing some healing. But ultimately, we want to play aggressive here. The first card I'm going to recommend is Scanning Officer, a 2-cost Imperial that only has the command aspect. It's a 2/3, so it has a nice attack and health. And when played, you can reveal 3 enemy resources. And if any of them have the smuggle mechanic, you can immediately defeat them and replace them with exhausted resources from the top of your opponent's deck. So not only does your opponent lose smuggle cards for future, they also are going to lose cards from the top of their deck that maybe they wanted to keep in their hands and play. They're also going to get exhausted resources. So if you play this before your opponent has been able to use any of their resources, this is going to prevent them from playing a number of cards on that turn. Next is another Imperial unit with the villainy aspect symbol. It's the Outland TIE Vanguard. With 2 attack and 1 health, you may give an experience token to another unit that costs 3 or less when you play this card. And that's really great when you're playing a little bit more of an aggro strategy. Putting those experience counters are going to give you a +1 to your power and +1 to your health. And so you'll be able to hit a little bit harder and stay in play a little bit longer. Next is Bounty Hunter's Quarry. When it comes to swarming your opponents, you want to get value where you can. Bounty Hunter's Quarry, when attached to a unit, says it'll have a bounty. And if they are a unique unit, you can essentially look at the top 10 cards. If they're non-unique, you'll look at the top 5 cards. And you'll search for a card that costs 3 or less and put it into play for free. Because you want to swarm your opponent, this would be a good card to throw on something that you know you can kill the same turn you play it. That way you can get more value of this card that same turn, putting more units in play than your opponent has. And last is going to be Salacious Crumb, a non-Imperial unit that works well with Vader's ability and theme. It's a 1-cost black villainy and command aspect card, so it can trigger Vader's ability. They are a 1/3 underworld creature. The 3 health is decent, and the 1 power is really insignificant here. Now, when you play Salacious, you're able to heal 1 damage from your base. And as an action, you can exhaust them to return this unit to its owner's hand. Then you deal 1 damage to a ground unit. So Salacious is great because it allows you to use Vader's ability every turn. You play Salacious Crumb, you've used Vader's ability to deal 1 damage to a unit and a base, you heal your base. Next turn, you return Salacious Crumb to your hand to deal 1 damage to a unit, and then you repeat. So that is a total of 4 damage being distributed every turn. 3 damage being distributed every turn. 1 damage to a unit from Salacious, 1 damage to a unit from Vader, 1 damage to the base, and you're healing. So that's a lot that you can do every turn. It slows down some of the actions if you need it to really benefit you, and it's just kind of a guaranteed healing and damage throughout the game. So the strategy here is to, again, play low-cost units with villain aspects to trigger Vader's leadership ability, Salacious Crumb being ideal. You want to ramp to 7 resources by killing your laser technicians or playing the single resupply found in your starter deck. You want to use low-cost units to kill your opponent's units for most of the time, but you're also playing the aggro, so make sure you're swinging into the base. And then you want to deploy Vader, then play Mahdi for some synergy. If you have good board control, and by that I mean if your opponent hasn't been as aggressive with you, then you can hold certain cards in your hand like the Vader's Lightsaber and the Snowtrooper Lieutenant until Vader's in play, so you can get an optimal large swings with Vader. You also want to stop playing resources after you have 7, considering 7 is the highest cost of all your cards. Now here's going to be an image of the deck here, and you can kind of see where we fill out what we kept. You see cards like General Veers, I'm Your Father, the ATST, Grand Moff Tarkin, so you can search for these Imperial cards quicker, and some Imperial TIE interceptors. So you'll have a variety of cards that are either going to deal direct damage or buff up some of your smaller units. I'm Your Father's a great card. Just remember, this is dealing damage, and so it's not a card you want to play on shielded units. It's usually a better one to play on your opponent's leaders. Let's move on to the Master Deck. Now, the Master Deck is going to have access to rares and legendaries and special cards from the starter deck that are found in Shadows of the Galaxy. Just because someone has access to all of these cards within Shadows doesn't mean we're going to be looking at any of the Spark of Rebellion cards. This is still focusing on people who are finding it difficult to find this first set of Star Wars Unlimited. So the goal here is to be able to deploy Vader a turn early. There's not much ramp found in Shadows of the Galaxy, so more than likely you're probably going to get Vader out on turn 5 rather than turn 6. We're still using Mahdi with his on-attack ability for a second attack each turn. And this time we are using our lower cost units that can trade with our opponent's units. We don't have to be as aggressive, but we should be aggressive when the opportunity is there. We also are ramping into high cost units and events early this time with multiple units we can play. And we're going to use our high cost units to overwhelm our opponent this time rather than going wider with multiple smaller units. First card we're going to add is the Scanning Officer. As I mentioned earlier, this is a great card with the new set because many of your opponents may be playing the Smuggle mechanic, and this is a great low cost card that can give you a little bit more value. We're also going to add Daring Raid this time. It's a 1-cost event that can deal 2 damage to a unit or a base. That direct damage can be really important, but this direct damage also is going to be beneficial because it can go to the base, so it's a good early card to take care of units that are in your way, like Sentinel ones or obnoxious things, but it's also going to be beneficial in the late game where you can just hit your opponent's base and possibly get you the win quicker. Next is Guild Target. We talked about this time we're trading with units, so we want to use the Guild Target to make those trades more valuable. It's a 0-cost red upgrade that gives your opponent's units a bounty. If the opponent unit is unique, the bounty is increased. But when that bounty dies, the opponent will take 2 damage to their base, or 3 if it was a unique unit, allowing you to get more value from your units hitting your enemy units. Next is a Black Sun Starfighter. We're adding this 3-drop villainy space unit into our deck because we really want more Sentinel. We want to buy some time. We want our opponent to swing into our units. And these Sentinel units essentially act as that. Since we're going a little bit slower, the Sentinel makes sure that we can at least damage opponents' units on the turn we play these cards, as opposed to putting out a unit and attacking the next turn. Another Sentinel unit is the Phase 3 Dark Trooper, a great one that came from the starter deck in the new set. It's another 3-cost Sentinel unit with the villainy aspect, and this one says when combat damage is dealt to the unit, give an experience token to them. So as long as they're being hit by units that hit for 1 or 2, they'll stay and play longer and get stronger as the game goes. And next is going to be the first rare I'm suggesting, and that is Palpatine's Return, a 6-cost command event and villainy event that says you can play a unit from your discard pile. It costs 6 less, and if it's a force unit, it costs 8 less instead. This card is great for bringing back cards, obviously, from your discard pile that your opponent may have defeated, but it's even more important because we're going to be adding some force users into the deck. The first one is Kylo Ren of the Killing the Past, a 6-cost unit that gives you some good value. Now, we can ignore the first part of his text because it doesn't really matter, but they are a 6-power, 7-health unit that says, on attack, you can give a unit, including himself, +2 attack for this phase. If it's a non-villainy aspect unit, give an experience token to it. So I like Kylo because he can make himself stronger and hit for 8, or he can bump up any of your other units in play. And again, that force user is going to make sure that you can swing with Kylo 1 turn. If he dies, you can return him back with Palpatine's return card. The next one is a rare, another force user at a 7-cost, same cost as Vader. He's the Darth Maul, a Shadow Collective Visionary, and he hits with a 7 power and has 6 health with the ambush and overwhelm mechanic. Ambush means when he comes into play, as long as your opponent has a unit, you can decide to attack that unit, ready maul, and swing. Overwhelm means any damage that the unit takes that goes over their current health is immediately forwarded to their base. So maul can get really good at essentially taking out your opponent's unit or their leader with that 7 power, and then hitting the opponent's base with any excess. Now, I love this because if you're ramping with cards, Maul can come out a turn early, but also Maul comes out the same turn as Vader, and that is a deadly pairing, especially if you put out Kylo before. You'll have 3 strong Force users, and your opponent's going to have to make some tough decisions on who should stay. Now, on attack, Maul's ability says you may choose another friendly underworld unit, and if you do, all combat damage that would be dealt to Maul is dealt to the chosen unit instead during the attack. So, Black Sun Starfighter or this last card, Salacious Crumb again, is going to be beneficial to you. We've already talked about Salacious Crumb, so let's move on. Here's going to be the full deck here of what you're going to be playing. Some of the cards we decided to keep was that single resupply, your First Legion Snow Troopers. We're also keeping Overwhelming Barrage, your Interceptors. And we did make some changes to the amount of cell block guards you're playing. For the starter, we still recommend playing Energy Conversion Lab in the Master deck. This is going to allow you to play a unit that costs 6 or less, preferably Kylo or Super Laser Technician is ideal, and you're going to give them ambush for the turn. I really like Kylo because this, again, you'll be able to do this with Kylo, have him swing, probably kill a unit. Next turn, you'll deploy Vader, and you'll either have a Maul or maybe a Palpatine's Return in your hand, allowing you to put out a second Force user and really overwhelm your opponent with some strong Force users that your opponent's going to have to make some hard decisions on. As a strategy, play low-cost units with villain aspects to trigger Vader's leadership ability. Ramp to 7 resources by killing your laser technicians or playing the single resupply. Use Kylo to draw attention the turn before you deploy Vader, so that way Kylo can maybe take some of the blue defeat events your opponent has. Deploy Vader, then play Madi for synergy. And if you have board control, hold on to the lightsaber until Vader's in play. You want to use Maul to take out leaders with high health. His ambush ability is going to be really important. You can kind of treat him as a defeat event. And Palpatine's Return is going to make sure you can get Maul back into play, so that way it never feels like you're wasting it. Lastly, you can discontinue playing resources after turn 7, considering your 2 highest cards are only 7 cost. So this is all I have for you for playing a budget in a master deck of Vader. Let me know how it works out for you, what cards you liked, what cards you didn't, and maybe some changes. Thanks so much for watching my channel. I wish you luck playing at your future Star Wars Unlimited events, and may the Force be with you.